in the midst of all that fun, nothing like a preacher to put a downer on a party, right? They're having fun and getting up there, la la la, and she gets up to talk. I almost said they ought to do an encore, you know. And this very situation is the situation of the psalmist this morning. There's this great worship song going on. They're singing, they're shouting, there's a tambourine. I thought they needed a washboard and cowbell, right? More cowbell. Yeah. There is this great emphasis on worship and celebration and singing and celebrating and trumpets. You gotta love a trumpet. Blow the trumpet on the full moon and the new moon. The full moon and the new moon, when the moon is shining bright and when the moon has hidden herself and it is dark. Blow the trumpet. Blow the trumpet. And then in the midst of all of this, the preacher gets up and interrupts and speaks a word on behalf of God. And it's not even like the preacher gets up to speak a word on behalf of God to say, good job. Good job, y'all. That was really fun. That's not what God says at all. God gets up and says, hey, y'all, that was great. The singing and the shouting is wonderful, but sometimes I just want to remind you, don't forget to hush your mouth and open your ears and actually listen. It's exciting. God goes on, there seems to be this problem. Y'all are always singing and doing your thing, and all that's great with your tambourines and your trumpets, but I'm trying to talk, and y'all are pretending to listen, and sometimes you actually do listen, God says, and then you go out and you do whatever the world you want to anyway. God says, it's not complicated. It's not complicated, but you think you know better. And so all this singing and stuff is great, but sometimes I wish you would do a little more listening and a little less talking. Like I said, nothing like a preacher to put a downer on a party, right? Preachers are total buzzkills. Somebody find Bill a cowbell. This psalm is about balance, I think. At least one thing it's about. Balance in our worship, balance in our lives, celebrating and reflecting. Full moon, new moon. There's balance in that. There's consistency in that. There's relationship in that. And, balance requires responsibility. The hard thing about this whole balance is that God gives us the opportunity to make our own choices. Yeah, that's a problem. And God, the goal here, I think, with all of this, is for us as human beings to be the best human beings that we can possibly be, to be all that God has created us to be. And God wants that for us, but God gives us the freedom to make that decision for ourselves, and that tends to be where we get sideways. It's like God says, here's the deal, says God. I keep telling you what you're supposed to do. And it's not complicated. It is not complicated. And you know what you're supposed to do, but you don't do it. And you're not hurting me, God says. I'm God. You're not hurting me, you're only hurting yourself in this deal. You're not only hurting yourself, but that makes me, God, sad. And maybe a little even upset. Some might argue that God is addressing God's community here as if God would teenagers. No offense to the teenagers in the room, because most of the time we blame it on you, but really we act the same way. And that's what God is saying here. Not that any teenagers in this room would act this way, but sometimes teenagers, parents say, maybe some of you once upon a time had a teenager in your house who maybe was 16 years old and they were brilliant. Brilliant. And they had it all figured out. Nobody ever had a teenager like that, right? I was never that teenager, regardless of what my mother said at the 8:30 service. Teenagers, just like all of us, we're all teenagers when it comes to this. God said, parents say, here's the deal, these are my rules and they're not complicated. Follow the rules and it'll all get along just fine. And you'll be better for it. I'm trying to help you, says the parent. I'm just trying to help you, trying to make you the best little person you can be. And the teenager says, yeah, I got it. I got this deal figured out. I'm going to go off and do whatever the heck I want to do. I hear such teenagers exist. I don't know any of them. Sort of like when the doctor prescribes you medicine, right? Doctor prescribes you medicine because you have surgery on your hand. And the doctor says, take it every morning at 7 o'clock, but take it with food, right? Because if you don't take it if you leave it the other way, you'll be in trouble and make you sick to your stomach. Some medicines, the doctor says, take it on an empty stomach. That's real important. You got to do just what the doctor says, or there are consequences. Now, the doctor does not show up or have her nurse show up on your doorstep at 7 o'clock to make sure that you take that pill. Nor does your phone ring at 7 o'clock and say, hey, that pill that I prescribed, did you take that this morning? It's on you. There's some responsibility here on you to do what you need to do so that you can be better. Anybody need more energy in the day? So you got a couple options. You can take the easy way out and get one of those 5-hour energy things that I don't understand what it does. Or you can do what they tell you to do, right? Get up, get on the treadmill a couple times a week, lace up the running shoes, take a walk through the neighborhood a couple times a week, go to bed at a decent hour and get some sleep. And there are consequences. And what do? We complain. I am so tired. Well, what time did you go to bed last night? 1 a.m. Why? Well, because there was a show on Netflix. It's about choices. God gives us those choices. And there are consequences when we don't. 2 weeks in a row, this is so exciting to me, 2 weeks in a row I've gotten to say, science backs up theology. That's just 2 weeks in a row. I told you last week, it never happens. 2 weeks in a row. Centering prayer and meditation. Centering prayer and meditation are good for you. Tons of scientific research. All you need to do is to sit quietly. Come up with a mantra, or use little prayer beads, whatever you need to do. 10 minutes, that's all. 10 minutes. Lower your blood pressure, quiet your mind, all that stuff. It's good for you. We know what we're supposed to do. We know we're supposed to exercise and get a good night's rest and do our meditation and do our daily devotional and get to church on Sunday and all that kind of stuff. That's what we're supposed to do. Some of us, takes effort. And I hear from folks, and I get it. I hear from folks, Shanna, I've just gotten out of the habit of coming to church because our routine changed or this happened and we've just fallen off the wagon. And it's embarrassing to try to come back. We've gotten kind of used to the nice, lazy mornings, big pot of coffee in the New York Times. I get it. Confession. I've fallen off my exercise routine wagon. I am off the wagon. I'm off the wagon in a bad way. I had this great routine. 5 a.m, had this boot camp group. Every day. Didn't miss it. Yeah, well, let me tell you, there are consequences to that. There are consequences. But it's hard. There are priorities. There is life. There is stuff going on. And it takes balance. And it takes commitment for whatever it is that we set our priorities to be. And God says, you know what you're supposed to do. Again and again, God says, you know what you're supposed to do. And in this psalm, God says, gather up, gather around. And the best line in this for me is the line that says, a voice I had not known. Did you catch that when Bill read it? When God begins to speak, it says, a voice I had not known. Now, if a stranger calls you on the telephone, right? And you go, oh, this isn't a voice I don't know. It's different than if your spouse calls you on the telephone or your BFF calls you on the telephone. She didn't even have to leave her name. And you know, oh, that's Sally. She didn't leave her name, she didn't leave her number, but I know that voice. I'd know that voice anywhere. But a voice you had not known, that's a voice you're not spending any time with. That's a voice you don't know well. And that voice in this psalm reading today is God herself. And this voice we do not know well says, gather up, gather around, listen up, because you need to be reminded. Remember those things I said to you last week? Yeah, I'm going to remind you of them again. Because maybe you weren't listening well last week because you went out and did the exact thing you didn't need to be doing. Whatever that is. You forgot about it this week, and so I got him here to tell you to stop a minute and remember, I am God and you are not. And listening is hard. And choosing God's ways over our ways are hard. That's hard. Doing what we know we are supposed to do is hard. And I don't understand why it's hard. I don't understand why it's so hard for us. And I felt really validated in that statement when a professor at Harvard said the same thing. I heard a professor at Harvard on a TED Talk this week. He is in charge of a study that has been running at Harvard University now for almost 80 years. 80 years. It started in 1938. And they started tracking all these people, and they were tracking health and happiness. And they were trying to figure out what is the single biggest predictor in long-term health and happiness. Now, some of these guys, and it was all guys when they started in 1938, of course. Since that time, we've gotten the girls involved. It's okay. But at this time, they started tracking guys. They talked to their kids. They've talked to their wives. Every year, they talk to these guys to try to come up with long-term, what makes the difference? What makes the difference in health and happiness? Anybody want to guess? Come on, guess. I should have said it differently. Come on, guess. Sleep? Oh, maybe. No. What? Servitude? Nope, not serving. Were you at 8? No, you weren't at 8:30. Yes, relationships. Relationships are the single biggest predictor. Good, close relationships are the best indicator of health and happiness. Doesn't mean you got to be married. Doesn't mean you got to be partnered. Does not matter. Good, close relationships protect your body and your brain, he said. And I would add spirit to that. Protects our spirit. Good, close relationships where you know that somebody is there for you. And good, close relationships aren't easy. And at the end of this TED Talk, he says, this wisdom is old as the hills. And then he goes on to say, why is this so hard for us to get and so easy for us to ignore? Because it's not complicated. So why do we have such a hard time with it? He says, well, because we're humans and we're looking for an easy fix. Something quick. Just get my doctor to prescribe me a pill that I'll take every morning at 7 o'clock. I can do that. That's simple. Relationships are messy. And as this PhD from Harvard says, they're complicated and they're not very sexy. Long-term relationships take work. They take rhythm and consistency. Relationships happen over full moons and new moons and festival days and ordinary days. And we have to celebrate them, and we also have to work at them. And if we are not working every day at our relationship with ourselves and with the divine creator of the universe, here's God. Hello. Did you forget what we talked about? Because our relationship, you're falling down on your end of the relationship here. God says, buck up. Come on. Because it's on us to make it work each and every day. Our relationship with God isn't just tambourines and trumpets and happy songs and cowbell. It's more than roses and date nights. At the end of the day, relationships are hard, and our relationship with ourselves and with God is maybe the hardest relationship we are in the world. And it takes effort, and it takes consistency, and it takes balance. A little bit of celebrating, a little bit of listening, a little bit of fun, a little bit of work. And if we can invest our energy in that, if we can, as the ancient psalmist says, give over our stubborn hearts to God, well, that, I think, is a life worth celebrating, singing and shouting a song of joy with a trumpet and a tambourine. May it be so. May it be so for us. Amen.